When you experience burnout, the advice, the suggestions you get are quite predictable and very surface level. The first thing you're told is you need to rest, you need to slow down, you need to manage your time better, you need to work smarter. Maybe you need to book a holiday, even a sabbatical. You need to become more resilient. Maybe you need to try breath work. Maybe you need to try meditation. Maybe you need a different bedtime routine. You need to sort out your self care and the like. But those strategies, in and of themselves, don't work for burnout. And I know that's a very strong claim. They do have their place. But first of all, we need to consider the environment we are operating within. It is not as simple as you overdoing it and you doing too much. That is taking an individual approach to a situation even that is actually societal and systemic. Those sorts of suggestions, whilst well meaning, and they do have their place, as I said just now, they tend to imply that the reason you're burnt out is your own doing. It doesn't take into consideration that we live in a society that celebrates us when we are over functioning, when we are over giving, when we are stuffing down our feelings, when we are being convenient. We are celebrated, particularly as women, when we are what society deems to be selfless. Just listen to that word, selfless. We are rewarded for being less of ourselves. But I have a different theory from my own experience of burnout, from studying burnout, from training as a somatic coach, learning about our nervous systems, understanding neurobiology, and working with countless women. I have come to understand that burnout is actually a communication method that occurs when we are so disconnected from ourselves that we numb ourselves to the truth of how we feel. Burnout is evidence of us trying so hard and succeeding in an environment that was never set up for us to flourish. When you look at the world we live in and the messages we receive, we are told that our overfunctioning, even working to the point of illness, is something to be celebrated. If you consider, I will even give you a personal story. There was one occasion when I was employed, I was at work, and for a good 3 to 4 days, every other word was a hacking cough. I was almost holding my sides because I felt like I was going to split open, but I had to be at work. I had things to do. I had a really busy caseload. I had a court case coming up I needed to be in. The more I coughed in between words, the more people talked about me being so committed and dedicated. Eventually, it was too much. I went to the GP, and the GP couldn't understand how I was functioning at work because they said that I had bronchitis and had left it to a point where it had become pleurisy, which is a really, 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 really bad cold. It's not as bad as pneumonia, but I was heading in that direction. That's what it took for me to listen to my body. Like literally the night before, I was burning up, sweating. That's what it took for me to listen to my body and decide to choose myself and my health over deadlines that could have been pushed or work that could have been picked up by somebody else. And part of the reason why I did that is because I loved the feeling of being needed. I felt a huge sense of validation and worth and felt like I was valuable when people were saying to me, "It's so wonderful that you're neglecting yourself to be able to show up into the office and do work somebody else could do." It gave me a sense of satisfaction, but that satisfaction was saccharine sweet. It was like eating Haribo when what you need is a really good home cooked meal. Does this sound familiar to anybody? I'm sure it does, because the people who connect with me and my work tend to be people who understand what toxic productivity is, and maybe they describe themselves as a type A, high functioning sort of personality. We are so resilient, that's one of our strengths, but that resilience comes unstuck. That resilience becomes a huge problem when we do not understand that there is a point at which we need to stop, otherwise, we're going to cause ourselves harm. And I use that word intentionally because what we do end up doing is causing ourselves harm. The physical harm of ill health, and the emotional harm of betraying ourselves, abandoning ourselves in favor of how we may be perceived by others. So I invite you to consider that burnout isn't a sign of weakness. It isn't a sign that you're not coping. I invite you to consider burnout as a radical act of love. Your nervous system saying to you, I love and care and cherish you far too much to allow you to carry on this way. So I'm going to pump the brakes really hard and make you stop and consider yourself and what you need. When you think about it, burnout makes absolute sense. If you consider the world in which we live, love, and work, you will see that a lot of what we do is knowledge based. Most of the people I'm in contact with, most of the people I work with, actually all of them are knowledge workers. Our work depends on our intellect, it's not about our physical labour. When you're a knowledge worker, you don't just pack your knowledge away, that knowledge moves around with you. Then I want you to consider, and the majority of my work speaks to women. Lots of men and other genders say, I relate to what you're saying so much. I know that you're speaking mainly to women, but I resonate with what you're saying. But if you look at the world in which we live, if you are, I'm talking really fast, let me slow myself down. I'm just passionate about this topic. But if you are an ambitious, high functioning woman, if you have got goals and you want to reach them, if you know that you have worked really hard, you've got qualifications, you've got experience, maybe you have put yourself in situations where you're volunteering and taking on extra projects and activities because you want to show how dedicated you are, you want to show that you've got leadership qualities that enable you to progress. You're doing that. You're carrying that home. You're thinking about what's happened in the day, how you can improve, how you can make things better. And then on top of that, you are thinking about fiber maxing, protein maxing, getting in your 10 steps, 2.5 liters of water a day, making sure you meditate, having a morning routine, having a 5-step skincare routine, making sure you're going to the gym and lifting heavy, making sure you're reading. There are so many things we want to do in order to live a healthy and productive life that's even more pressure on our knowledge base because we've got to keep track on all those things. Even if we use trackers, even if we've got a diary, even if we have an assistant, even if we have people cleaning our homes for us, we've still got to do all of that organizational work. I know so many of my peers who have got cleaners, but they need to organise what happens with the cleaners. And sometimes they're doing a little clean before the cleaner comes in because they don't want to leave the cleaner with the rack and ruin of their very, very busy lives. We're juggling a lot. Then, if you're a parent, you have got the emotional and mental load of being a parent, the invisible labour. Women still are disproportionately the default parent. If you're a single parent, then you're every single parent there is. You have got to think about your child's development, making sure you're supporting them to achieve academically, making sure they're eating the right things. And Lord knows, the people I know have their children in all sorts of extracurricular activities because you want to give your children a well-rounded life, as you should. I had my time of running up and down to different clubs and all sorts of things because I wanted to provide my daughter with opportunities. But all of that is sitting on top of all of that knowledge work you're doing. And a lot of people in my world are doing high stakes work. Me, as a social worker, sometimes I was making choices that felt like I was contributing to playing God. There was a lot of responsibility. Then you're trying to maintain a social life because you know human connection is important. You want to show up for your friends because you want to be a good friend. And also, we want our friends to show up for us. There are so many things we carry. And because we carry them mentally, we do not see the physical toll it takes, the pressure it puts on our bodies. Now, while we may be working with our brains and doing all of this stuff with our brains, the energy has to come from somewhere. It comes from our bodies, which is why sometimes we wonder, why are we so exhausted when all we've done is been at our desk all day, but we've been at our desk doing important work and carrying the weight of all of the responsibility we carry. It's a lot. Quite often it is too much. But because we're not seeing the physical labour, we can dismiss ourselves. We tell ourselves, you're not really tired, you're lazy. You don't need to eat nutritious meals. You can eat the scraps off your children's plate and eat well tomorrow. We tell ourselves all of these things because toxic productivity culture that wants us to be productive at all costs tells us whatever we do, we must not let it get in the way of our productivity. Even the way we parent, we are encouraged to parent in a manner that doesn't take away from our productivity. I became a mother in 2007, and I remember the narrative being all about mothers not letting motherhood change them. We were still talking about people snapping back and talking about people not allowing their motherhood to change who they were or how they showed up for work. Let's take a pause and think about that for a minute. We were being celebrated for doing something that was totally and utterly life changing. Once you become a mother, you are no longer the person you were before. Obviously, there are elements and there are fundamental parts of you that remain, but you are operating in a totally new operating system. Yet we encourage mothers to behave as if that doesn't happen. When we do that, what we're actually encouraging mothers to do is spread themselves really thin all over the place. My friend, you are not Lurpak or Anchor. You're not supposed to be spread around thinly all over the place. And where is the time for you? We'll think about things like, oh, we're going shopping. We're going to numb ourselves with some material goods. You might get a high for 5 minutes when you tap your card and when you try whatever it is on home, and maybe even the first time you wear it, but you're going to come back to the same environment that caused you to overfunction in a way that is toxic. Well, all overfunctioning is really in the first place. So being resilient in this environment works against us. One of the brilliant things about being a human being is that we are so adaptive. We can adapt to our environment. But that adaptation becomes maladaptive and unhelpful when it is encroaching on our quality of life and our health. Maladaptive, mal literally means minus. So we can trick ourselves into feeling like we've had a good day, we've worked really hard, but we're doing it in a way that is taking away from us. That adaptation is no longer healthy. And one of the reasons this is so easy for us to normalize is the way we grow up. I remember seeing my parents, people in our community, people all around us busy all the time. We would greet people in the street. My mum knew lots of people in the neighbourhood. We would greet people in the street and she would ask people, how are you doing? Oh, I can't complain. My parents are from Sierra Leone. In the Sierra Leonean community, you would ask people how they're doing and they'll say, I didn't manage. I'm managing. So we have lots of normalized language that speaks to being exhausted. And I don't know about you, but as a child, I never saw anybody that looked rested. When people were resting, having a nap, or whatever the case may be, they were doing it to recover from grueling tiredness. They weren't taking a nap to feel refreshed and to restore themselves. That napping was part of an adaptation that had become maladaptive because all it was about was coping. When I was a child, I saw women make huge strides, but those strides always came at the expense of their life force energy. These women were always utterly exhausted. I remember seeing my mum and people in our community exhausted, scraping the bottom of the barrel of their energy to be able to engage with their children. Sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we're in a position of survival, but sometimes we are in a position where we could be thriving, but the pattern of survival is so ingrained, we cannot allow ourselves to set ourselves up to thrive, to flourish. And I call time on that. After writing my book and being radicalized, evangelized by the research I was doing and by having all of my ideas in one place, I started to reassess my goals and carefully consider what is important at this stage of my life. And I came to the conclusion that ambition is like an engine, it's an energy source, and we can use our ambition to enable us to achieve things. And what I could see from my life and the many people around me is that ambition was about doing more for the sake of doing more. There was never ever an end goal, an end game. It was not about satisfaction. So I decided I want to use my ambition as a force for good. And I want to utilize my ambition to enable me to do things that help me become a well rested woman. So I make choices that enable me to move closer to that goal. Now, don't get me wrong. There are many of occasions where I have to push myself and go beyond my capacity, go beyond my bandwidth to be able to do so. Case in point, it is now 9:20 p.m. I've had various things going on in the day and I procrastinated and stalled a little bit, but part of my growth and part of the things I want to achieve will be much easier with me having a presence on a platform like YouTube. So I nearly thought, oh, you can do it tomorrow. And then I read your lovely comments on my video from yesterday and I thought, Tamu, you've got to show up. You've got to show up for them. You've got to show up because you know that this is part of the fabric you're weaving together to create that goal of being a well-rested woman. So it's not all kumbaya, la la la, sitting on a lily pad meditating. Sometimes you do have to push yourself, but I am pushing myself in service of something that's going to benefit me and nourish me in a holistic way. Whereas previously, I was pushing myself because I wanted to be productive for the sake of being productive. Now, my productivity, rather than being toxic and being rooted in how people perceive me, my productivity is in service of that goal of being a well rested woman. It means I'm much more discerning with myself. It means that I have clear boundaries with myself that are my duty to uphold. Our skill of adaptation becomes maladaptive, so it's a minus adaptation. It is not helping us anymore. When that adaptation turns into chronic overfunctioning, you don't know what to do unless you're busy. You're the type of person who always wants to make themselves useful. You're always flitting around the place and sitting down actually feels unsafe. I remember I've got a pink chair that is my pink contemplation chair. I sit there, I think about things, I think about ideas, I read books, I do things that stimulate my mind. And for the first few months of having that chair, when my daughter's key would go in the door when she was coming home from school, I would jump up. And I know that was definitely from my West African upbringing where parents were offended if they saw you resting for the sake. You had to be ill to be resting. If you were just sitting down chilling, there would be a skirting board for you to wipe down or a door frame or something. That pattern was still very strongly within me. That is a maladaptation. When you're hypervigilant, when you're constantly scanning the environment to make sure that you're doing things the right way, that you're being perceived the right way. People pleasing, making yourself convenient, not speaking your truth, not advocating for yourself, not having the boundaries you need to be able to live a wholehearted, full life. All of these sorts of things become normalized in a culture of toxic productivity, and it makes it very difficult to untangle yourself and choose something different. Because when we choose ourselves, when we prioritize ourselves, when we say, actually, no, I don't have the capacity to do that. Does it need to be done today? Can we look at when else I can do it, bearing in mind what I've already got in my diary? People can be quite offended by that. People can feel like you're not committed, you're not a team player, you're not dedicated, you don't love them. There are a whole load of things people can come up with because we have all been conditioned in the same societal waters to a lesser or greater degree. When we understand this, and we understand that having boundaries, advocating for ourselves, and being aware of the societal structures we live within, we put ourselves in a position where we can start to exercise agency and make powerful choices for ourselves. So, one of the things I talk about all the time is that burnout is often a predictable outcome of a culture of toxic productivity. It doesn't mean that I'm encouraging people to embody victim consciousness or a victim mindset. I'm not encouraging people to say, well, it's the system. The system's so big, I can't do anything about it. I'm just going to carry on as I was, or there's no hope. You have some kind of existential crisis. One of the things I say all the time is that our nervous systems are a reflection of the system in which we live when we are not conscious. When we are conscious about the societal and systemic structures around us, we can start to choose differently. We can start to say it might be normal for all of my colleagues every day of the week for them to be at their desk with one hand on their keyboard, one hand on a sandwich, having lunch, but I'm going to choose different. I'm going to choose to actually take my lunch break. When I did this initially, I did it twice a week because I felt so guilty actually taking a proper lunch break because everybody around me would be toxically tapping away with one hand and eating with another. But when I started to do that, I could feel the difference. We think that these things don't make a difference because they feel too small. But the small things you do every day, it's like putting it in an investment account. It compounds, it builds over time. And over time, you're building a trusting relationship with your body, and you start to trust that when you expend energy, you're going to take some time to recoup that. So, understanding the systemic structures at play doesn't mean that you're now going to lay back and be a victim. It allows you to see the game that is being played so that you can play your own game within that system that gives you a bit of space so that you're not constantly exploiting yourself. Okay, I'm going to wrap up because this is way more than 10 minutes, I think, and I wanted to make sure these videos were 10 minutes long. But what I want to leave you with is that when you understand the society you are living within and the systemic structures we operate in, you can start to liberate yourself by making choices that support you rather than choices that exploit you. So, I want to leave it here and I want to leave you with a question or a few questions. Let's see how I go. I want you to get really honest with yourself about what makes life feel good for you. I want you to think about what is important. And then I want you to consider all the things you do that you believe to be important but aren't actually important when you think about living a life that feels good to you. When I did this exercise, I thought about the life I want to live, where I want to live, the type of house, the type of car I want to drive, the holidays I want to go on, how much I want to save and invest and all of that kind of stuff. And I went deep. I was on Rightmove, looking at property prices. I was on comparison sites, working out how much utilities would be. Oh, do you know what? I'm going to leave this in. My light that I have down there has just gone off. It has run out of battery. I'm not re recording, I'm not charging it, I'm just going to keep going. What I'm saying is that once I realised how much my life would cost, that is what I was working towards. I've got so many people in my life. They are online business owners, they are service based, whatever it is they do. They want to reach seven figures or they're already at seven figures. They want to be turning over millions. When I see what they're doing and my goal of being a well rested woman, I'm not prepared to put the work in they do. I'm just not on it. That's not what makes life feel good for me. But I have calculated to the penny what my business needs to generate in order for me to live what feels like a good life. Why? Because I asked myself what would constitute a good life. That's what I asked myself in the first place. I asked myself what is important. And then I focused on the actions I need to take to bring that into fruition. So I want you to ask yourself and be really honest. What makes life feel good for you? What is living your best life? What does that entail? Why is it important? And then you can think about the actions you need to take, the way you need to work, live, love, all of those sorts of things in order to bring that into fruition. Okay, that's it from me. Until tomorrow, take good care. Goodbye.